Let's bring in Simon Harding, a former Detective Chief Inspector with the Met Police. Thanks for joining us, Simon. Well, you've appraised yourself of the proposals, but from Labour and Tory the Tories about how to finally try to get to grips with our knife epidemic, the scourge of knife crime soaring every day. Do you think they go far enough? I mean, are they coming up with concrete ideas that might do something about it? Or is it, as we've seen so many times before, just political verbiage?
Well, I think that's the important part, isn't it? We've seen it so many times before. You know, we looked at 2019, 2020, when there was the biggest surge in knife-enabled crime, sort of 15,000, and the biggest we'd seen for many, many years. And unfortunately, here we are still talking about it in 2024. And I think, you know, when you look at and take apart some of the things they're talking about, certainly one of the things that does stand out for me, which would be useful, is taking away these items in private premises. You know, it's quite often when officers go to make arrests or deal with people that they see these zombie knives and swords and things that shouldn't be in possession of certain people in rooms or by front doors, ready to go, which are there for the sole reason of, you know, what they say, protecting themselves, or you know, or they're ready to take out when they want to. And I think taking those away is quite an important step, where you could take a significant number of these type of items off people, when before and now we can't, because they're in private premises.
Simon, I don't have any statistics on this. I don't have any evidence for this. But one imagines, I mean, a lot of people would be horrified by the fact that such weapons can be sold and owned in the UK anyway, and why something wasn't done about this in the past. But I would imagine that the vast majority of stabbings are not carried out using zombie knives and ninja blades, but probably the sort of knives that I have in my kitchen. Is that right? Or am I sort of missing the point here?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, I dealt with homicides for quite a number of years in London, and obviously the majority of those are knife-enabled homicides. You could probably count on one hand those that have been done by those type of weapons, those zombie knives. Yeah, so it is those kind of domestic knives. So therefore, you know, that's where the deeper dive into the possession of these, you know, how easy it is to get hold of knives. And then obviously at the back end of that, the deterrent of having knives, no matter what they are, in public when you're not supposed to have them. And I think, you know, this is a bigger picture. But we've had a lot of years to talk about this. And, you know, I was in the police for 30 years, and when I joined, knives were prevalent in a number of attacks, and they still are today. So I do struggle, you know, and I'm very supportive of the police and the work that officers have to do, and those that have to face knives themselves. But really now, you know, are we going to be talking about this again in a couple of years' time again? Is it more reactive? You know, are we talking about every time they see a surge, they talk about this and deal with it as a reactive way, rather than proactive elements to start taking these knives away, and start to build legislation which is suitable for the society that we live in, and how easy it is to get knives from a local shop, compared to those, you know, those horrible knives that we see, these zombie knives that you can get very, very easily online.
Simon, like a lot of people in the media, you know, we're pretty swift to attack the police. They do make mistakes. There are justified concerns about policing in this country right now, but that is not to take away from the hard-working officers who do the best they can. And we talk to coppers all the time, and the big frustration for them is so often the punishment does not fit the crime. So what we're talking about here is kids with knives. They need to be punished more severely than they are right now, I would suggest. And with many people, and I think I might agree with it, they're starting to talk about a zero tolerance policy. So if the message gets to kids that if you get caught on the streets with a knife, you go to jail, no questions. One strike and you're out. Would you think that might help? Would that send the right message to kids?
I think it's one of the strands that should be looked at. But I think also when you look at statistics, and I was looking back at statistics from 2022, 23, and only sort of 18% of those knife-enabled crimes were committed by juveniles, as we call them, between 10 and 17. So this isn't, you know, let's not look at kids as just the problem here and the deterrent there. This is, you know, the rest of these are committed by adults. You know,
to send that deterrent message to everyone. You get caught with a knife walking down the street, you go to jail. End of.
Yeah, and it's more difficult when you're talking about juveniles, because obviously that, you know, the legislation, the protection and vulnerability and safeguarding around these youngsters who sometimes don't know different is you know, every court case is very, very different, and you hear all sorts of backstories of these kids, you know, those that have been caught with knives, and how they've, you know, how they've lived in society, and it's very different. Certainly, I'd still think, you know, even taking that away, that the deterrent needs to be a deterrent, and we talk about a deterrent, but it's not very consistent. You know, somebody might get 6 months in prison for possession of a knife. The one that follows behind in another part of the country, which isn't, you know, a metropolis as such, will get nothing, and we'll say get nothing. Might get a community order to go and pick up litter in a local area. So, you know, it has to be consistent right the way through the country. You know, the Met isn't the worst in this as well, don't forget. You know, I think West Midlands came out worse, followed by Cleveland before. So, you know, this isn't just a central London issue. This is right across the country. So the deterrent needs to be consistent from, you know, the top of the country down to the bottom of the country. So, and that's where you'll start to see, I think, a change when it fits the crime. And the crime is that you're carrying a knife, and knife enabled crime is by those that carry these knives in public when they shouldn't.
Yeah, really briefly, because we've got to move on now, Simon, but there's something I really quickly want to ask you. One is it about time we bring back stop and search? And two, what about all these face coverings? Because we've seen that shoplifting's gone up 32%. It strikes me that a lot of kids are getting away with stuff because they walk around with balaclavas on and hoods up.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one as well. I mean, I think you know, certainly with the masks issue, I mean, it became very confused, obviously, around the COVID time as well, because obviously, you know, everyone had an excuse to wear a mask, and now we've got you know, kids walking around. You can't do it necessarily, just take a mask off somebody. It's a very difficult, you know, legislation in the cold to deal with, you know, when someone's got their face covered. But you know, yeah, there's lots of things like that. It certainly, crime is a worrying. You're seeing more of it. You're seeing lots of youth getting involved in these shoplifting and steamings into places, and you know, there needs to be a real pullback and a sort of a zero-based review about knife crime and other crimes like that.
Simon, thank you so much. Fascinating stuff. Good to talk to you.